Mr. Ambassador, last year in March, after Russia illegally annexed Crimea, there was a lot of criticism by the Ukrainians towards the US and the United Kingdom, who were the primary guarantors of Ukraine's territorial integrity under the 1994 Budapest Memorandum. What was your response to this criticism?
My response was to say, first of all, look carefully at the Budapest Memorandum, remind yourself of what it says. But we reminded ourselves of what it says, and we reminded ourselves that it did give us, that we had committed we had reaffirmed our commitment to not interfering with Ukraine's territorial integrity, to refrain from economic coercion and so on, and we reminded ourselves that Russia also gave those commitments. And we looked at the very last paragraph of the Budapest Memorandum, which said that the parties to this memorandum will consult with each other in the event of any question arising in the context of this memorandum, and right from the start it was clear to us that Russia was not going to enter into those consultations. So in a sense it was clear to us that it was yet another it was yet another kind of international undertaking that Russia was not prepared to honor.
Mr. Ambassador, during the last year, Russia's aggression has put many countries and alliances on high alert. The UK's Air Force was forced to scramble its jets to intercept Russia fighter jets which were heading towards UK's airspace. How much of a threat Russia has become to the entire European continent in the past year?
Well, I think we need to be sober about looking at this. I think our starting point, as I've said before, is that it is a great disappointment and an enormous worry to us that a country in our European region, a country with whom we have built up some good experience of working constructively on international issues over the years since the fall of the Soviet Union, that country has become a problem for us, and to some extent, yes, it has become a threat to us by virtue of its clear willingness to violate international law. And I think that we have entered into a period where we have lost a great deal of trust in the relationship, and where strategists in many European countries need to look and think again very seriously about the arrangements that they're making to mitigate the risks that arise from this new and difficult relationship with Russia. I think we need to be, as I say, I think we need to be realistic, we need to be sober, we need to be calm, and we need to be objectively focused. I think one of the things that would serve us least well at the moment would be to go into some kind of hysteria, some kind of over-exaggeration of any threat to our regional security, but it is something about which what the experience of the last year has told us, it's something about which we need to keep our eyes wide open, and I think, as I say, the strategy of Russia in the last year has not been such as to inspire very much trust in their future intentions, in their future strategy. I think it's the position of our government to say, you know, we are not exactly expecting that we will see kind of Russian aggression break out and military intervention break out all over Europe. I think that would be I would certainly put that in the category of a sort of exaggerated version of the threat we see. But as I say, I think it is a serious and substantial worry to us to have seen how ready Russia is to violate international law. I think that has implications for the assumptions we make about the stability of our relationships, and I think it has implications for the assumptions we make about the adequacy of our own arrangements, not only in the UK but also in the NATO alliance. It raises questions about what is adequate in order to defend our interests, both bilaterally on a UK basis, but also through the NATO alliance.
Mr. Ambassador, you just said that we have seen that Russia is so willing to violate international law. Do you think they're doing this without fear for consequences?
We pick up a lot of messages from our contacts with Russia and with Russians, and I think it's very clear from that. I think it's also very clear from a lot of public statements that you will see by Russians in political and public life that clearly the response to their violations of international law in terms of sanctions, that clearly those are things which have raised a lot of concerns for them. As you quite rightly said a few minutes ago, they have not yet been got so far as to persuade the Russian strategic decision makers to change their approach. But I think we do see evidence that yes, international law has been violated. There's been a quick response in terms of sanctions, and that yes, that response in the sanctions has provoked a lot of thought, and it's provoked a lot of unease, and I think it's fair to say a lot of dissatisfaction with the strategy of the Russian administration, even within Russia. So I think that it is something which has been noticed in Russia. It's something which has raised concerns, and it's something where it's very clear that this has been a consequence of the Russian decision to do what it did in annexation of Crimea, to continue to do what it's doing in occupying Crimea, and to continue what it's doing in terms of supporting the conflict, the continuing conflict in the Donbass. So yes, I think the fact that those actions have consequences, it's my very strong sense that those consequences are recognized in Russia, that the fact that these things have happened, the fact that the Russian economy has seriously suffered as a result of the sanctions imposed, I think that is very clearly recognized.
Mr. Ambassador, in just several weeks, you'll be leaving your post as the ambassador to Ukraine. What will be your main counsel to your successor?
The first point I would make is that I'm very glad that I will not need to, when I talk to my successor, I'm not talking to someone who is at all unfamiliar with the region, who is unfamiliar with some of the big political relationships in this region. My successor is someone who has served in the past as the British ambassador to Georgia. She was also the director of our department in the Foreign Office in London, with responsibility for our relationships right across the region, with Russia, with Ukraine, with the countries of South Caucasus and Central Asia, and so on. So she's definitely not starting from a blank sheet of paper. So to some extent, she won't need my advice. But I think the sort of advice I would give about operating in Ukraine, first and foremost, I would say you will be surrounded by people, cooperation partners, people particularly in civil society with whom we have worked very successfully over the years. I would say meet as many of them as you can in an early part of your tenure, listen to what they have to say, listen to their advice. Second piece of advice I will give, and this is not, maybe not entirely serious, but not entirely unserious either. I would say get used to the fact that a lot of things in this country happen at very short notice. You will often be invited, including by official bodies, you will often be invited to participate in events, to come to meetings, to participate in discussions, sometimes only at about 2 hours' notice. Get used to that, because you will be working in an environment where you have to make changes to your timetable very quickly, very flexibly, and so on. There's probably lots of advice I could give, but the third point, which I think is really important, is to say make sure you take the opportunities to travel around the country. I've learned so much myself from getting out to different regions, to talking to people in different parts of Ukraine, learning about what's on their mind, learning about some of the differences in perspective that you will, and differences in sort of priorities that you will see in different parts of Ukraine. And that will also, I think, really reinforce to you just what an enormously fascinating and rewarding country you're working in.
Well, that looks like that's a very sound and practical advice, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you very much for finding the time to talk to us. This was Volodymyr Sulhov for Ukraine Today, together with the UK Ambassador to Ukraine, Mr. Simon Smith. Thank you for watching us.